And then we went,
Yeah, we left off with Palmyra Place on the last one,
Yeah.
so you were talking about famous athletes and things like that around you. And we moved in there. There's two things I remember about Palmyra Place. I remember you guys telling me, well, I guess there's more than two things. I remember a very aggressive game of slapjack. I remember you telling me that Tracy cut her foot on like a heating vent or something
Yes.
out there. She was just a toddler.
Yep.
And I remember I went down for the count and cracked open my ear.
Yep.
I remember Aunt Becky coming and staying with us for a while.
Yeah.
I remember that was the last time we saw your father alive. He pulled in with some pickup truck with a camper on back or something, and went over. You said he went over and stayed with Roy and passed away over there.
Yep.
But anyway, I remember the rocks in the front yard. Those are the things I remember. So I don't know if you want to elaborate on any of those.
No, I think that's kind of got Elmira. We had a nice pool, a community pool, and that was fun. But then we from there.
Well, I know I started elementary school, kindergarten for the first time there. The cutoff was the end of the year, and being an October baby, I started still age 4 and turned 5 in October.
Okay.
And that'll probably come up with the next place we move to. Well, why don't you give us your version of slapjack then?
Well, I had this son who was very competitive, and this particular lesson that he was about to receive was called losing. We played slapjack, and
The premise of the game is you have a deck of cards, right?
And when Jack comes up, you have to slap it. If you do, you get all the cards.
So you're just turning the deck over one card at a time.
Yep.
And then you slap the deck, and then you get all the cards that were in that deck. And so whoever has the most cards at the end of the game is the winner, huh?
Yep. Well, after 3 or 4 times, and of course I always won, the very last time, well, I kind of strung it out for him a little bit. And when I got that last card, he came across the table from my throat. Ah! Yep. that was it. But I believe in never quitting, and I believe that you got to have that kind of tenacity. You just don't give up. Just keep going. And eventually, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. So.
Well, Mom tells a story that when you were flipping the cards over, of course, you get to see them as they go down.
No, that's not true. Now, I can't believe how many times your mother accused me of cheating at games. And I can never remember cheating at games, whether it was playing Trivia Pursuit with Heather and
Jim Walton.
Jim, or playing cards, whatever. I mean, it's just a game. Sure, I like to win like everybody else, but I have no problem if it goes the other way. It goes the other way. But it was such a hang up that we stopped playing with other people. You couldn't do it. Yeah, there was a couple of times when we were playing with Heather and Jim, and Heather and Beth would take Jim and I on, and sometimes they won, sometimes we won. But she would get frustrated about when things didn't go her way, and I think I can honestly say now, after all of my life experience, that is a female gender thing.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I think that it's just the way they're built. That, or else maybe it's
just the women you pick.
maybe that's
Because
it.
Maxine's pretty mellow in the game department.
Is that
I don't
right?
think she ever has accused me of cheating. And there was one time that I was cheating my pants off. Okay, so we developed this game. Remember when I bought that house up in Logan and I have to go up there pretty regularly because the kids were up there and we have different activities that would go up there, or I was
Yep.
reconditioning the house? Well, she would go with me. Well, the car I was driving, nowadays they're all digital, right? Well, one of the settings I have for the little display right in between the speedometer and the tachometer could do anything from showing your cruise control, your speed, whatever, but it also would show the radio information with the title and name. And so we would put it on a country station because I didn't know country very well. And we would turn off the main radio screen, make it black, or put it on a different setting. And as an artist would come up, I would say, this is Garth Brooks, or this is Reba McEntire, or this is whatever. And sometimes I would intentionally get it wrong, but the reality was is I had it on my display who it really was. And she couldn't see that from where she was sitting because it was right in front of me through the steering wheel. And so I would be like, oh, this is Luke Combs. Oh, this is Jason Aldean. And she's like, oh, he's, she would say, oh, that guy's fairly new. I'm surprised you even know that one, because she listens to country all the time. I never listen to country.
Yeah.
And so when we first started playing this game, I was terrible at it. So then I discovered this little display and switched over there. And two or three times we play that, she was like, wow, you're really good at this, like name that game kind of thing. It was more just a one-sided trivia thing because she would get them all. If we were competing, she would be able to actually get them. She was just like so impressed. Well, I made the mistake one time of leaving the display up after we parked the car in the garage, and she took the car out the next day, saw it on there, and I was busted. But I was cheating my pants off on because I didn't know who any of these people were, but I was impressing her, and I would eventually come clean at some point. But I was like anybody who's cheating, there's some relief in getting caught. But it was kind of funny. But you're saying Mom had such a competitive streak in her, she could have come across the table and choked you in slapjack too.
Yeah, no question.
So I came by it naturally.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, she didn't like games, and I don't know. Again, it's just a game. What we play occasionally now with Becky, we play occasionally with the sisters and their husbands, and
My sisters, is that your sisters?
yeah.
So Anna and Lois and Roger and Kendall.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she's not big on games either, but we do play it once in a while with them, and it hasn't become a big problem. But she's competitive too. She likes to win. Yeah,
Well,
everybody. Yeah.
yeah, I don't think anybody wants it given to them. I mean, I don't know how old I was before I finally beat you for the first time playing checkers. You never just rolled over and gave it to me.
No.
So
I
I think you want it to be competitive.
Yeah. I really don't agree with that. I've witnessed it a couple times where the attaboys come for just effort. I don't believe in a participatory trophy being worth anything.
Yeah, I agree.
You know.
I agree. All right, so Palmyra Place, I remember walking to and from school there. That was my first stint in kindergarten. Jennifer and Tracy were toddlers because they're only a year apart. The next place we go from there is
San Mateo.
San Mateo. Okay.
San Mateo, and that's because
Another rental.
yeah,
Okay.
and that's because I was working in Colma Daly City, and
Was that the 7 months with
yeah,
the other dealer?
yeah.
So that's why we moved.
Yeah, because I mean when I drove from San Ramon to Daly City, that was 2 hours each way. So I was working 12-hour days, 2 hours each way, 16 hours.
Yeah.
And I mean it was murder. But anyway, so that's why we moved to San Mateo, and that was, I think that one is Canyon Circle or something Circle. Anyway, it was right there off the freeway, And yet we had the fire station across
Across the street, yeah. Here's the things I remember about the house. We were in essentially a cul-de-sac, even though the fire department was across the way. They had these pillars that were in with there with a padlock that they could pull out if they needed to come in, because otherwise the fire truck would have a tough time making the turns to come all the way in there.
Yeah.
There was a big old rock in, like a island in the middle of that cul-de-sac that you'd have to create a circle to drive around.
Yep.
I remember bumping the shifter and rolling the car back into the street and bumping against that. I remember Mom had a daycare of some sort, like she had watched a couple of kids there.
Well, she watched the Sheldon's kids.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah.
I just remember Charlie, I think was his name.
Yeah.
There was a little kid that was my age, Charlie, that Mom babysat.
Yeah.
I remember having a sore throat and Mom taking the pincher grabbers and a cotton ball and the methylate and jamming it down my throat and swabbing my tonsils. That was nasty. Don't know that I ever complained of a sore throat again.
Yeah, I understand.
This is where I went to kindergarten for the second time. So you want to explain the logic as why I repeated kindergarten?
Probably because, I was always the youngest person in my class.
Thanks to an October 25th birthday.
Correct. And I didn't want to put you in that spot. I don't think that was a good place to be. And so when we got there, they said you were eligible to go, and I was reluctant to even let you go up at San Ramon, but your mother wanted you to, so we did.
You mean the first time for kindergarten?
Yeah.
In San Ramon, because that was Pleasant Hill, right?
Yep.
Or Pleasure Hill? No, not Pleasant Hill.
San Ramon.
Because I thought Pleasant Hill was. I thought I was confusing
No.
the place.
Pleasant Hill was before Santa Cruz. That was the last place.
Right.
So we went to San Mateo.
Yeah.
Now you would have.
No.
You had.
What was the name of the place with the rock front yard and the sports guys? That was.
That's Palmyra Place.
Palmyra Place. See, there's Pleasant Hill, Palmyra Place. That's what I was mixing up. Okay. So Palmyra Place, you send me to kindergarten because that's taxpayer money's paying for that. It's free. It's easy daycare, right?
Yeah.
So you send me there. I get to do finger painting and all the other crafts and stuff and get my basics for kindergarten, and then you move, and so you enroll me in kindergarten again. And Mom has a 22nd of October birthday, so she too went through as the youngest. So it probably wasn't a big hard sell to tell her to have me repeat kindergarten.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. No, we were in agreement on that. And anyway, you went to school there, and then It was in March of the next year. That would have been '78. Is when Dean Weaver called me on the phone and said, "If you'll come back, I promise I'll never talk to you ever again." And by now I was making some visible things happen with Oldsmobile. And so he was seeing my numbers, and he was seeing over at Ceremony. I was just tearing them up, and so I don't know what I'm sure Roy had some input in it too. But anyway, so I told him no, and I said, "Dean, I'll come back. But if I come back, I need some sessions. I need my own office. And he says, okay. So even then, I still didn't say yes. I told him I'd think about it. But then Tom Price, my dealer, gets this wild hair. He goes to a dealer 20 group meeting, and he comes back from that dealer 20 group meeting, and he is hired a guy to be the new manager over the whole store. And he comes back and he introduces him as the new manager, and he gets up and he bears his testimony, and I listen to him. And after it's over, I went to him, and his last name was Roberts, I remember. I went to him and I said, I understand what you said, but I went and I clarified with him on a couple of points that he had made that didn't sit well with me. And I went over those with him, and I said, I need you to know that I'll support you every way I possibly can, but those things I will not do. I won't encourage anybody else to change. I'll try to be supportive, but I'm telling you, I don't do that. And they were things that I felt was,
That would be considered dishonest.
yes. And he says, well, there can't be two of us. And I said, I understand that. We can't have two ways to do it. And, you know, so it's up to you. But I'm not going to quit, but I'm telling you, I won't do what you want me to do. So I go back to my office, and a few minutes later, he comes out and he says, talked with Tom, and Tom says that he gave me the deal, and so whatever I say goes. And I said, okay, well, I'm done. So I picked up the phone and I called over to Canals, and I said, let me talk to Dean. And they said, okay. And so Dean came on the phone. I said, this is Ross. Is that offer still available? He says, yep. I said, okay, I'll be there yet today. So I walked out and packed my stuff up, drove over to Canals, and how did I get to Canals? Think about that.
Yeah, because you would have been driving a company car, right? You
Yeah.
couldn't take that with you.
Yeah, somebody drove me over there. I'm trying to think who it was. I don't remember. Might have been my favorite salesman, Rob N. Cheatham. That was his name. Yeah, he's a good salesman too. But anyway, somebody took me over there and dropped me off, and I got over there. And Roy and Roy's got some detail guys. We had this old supply room off of it was kind of just a catch-all room off of the back showroom. And they're out there pulling all the stuff out. The next day they painted it and put a new carpet in and
Slapped in a desk and a couple
Yep.
of chairs, and you're up and running, huh?
yeah, that was my office. And there I got to do some other things too, besides selling and handling my business. I also was doing dealer trades and doing inventory. And that's when I made a call one day for a dealer trade to Santa Cruz. And Don Starr answered the phone. And I said, what are you doing answering the phone? I said, you're the dealer. Everybody knows you don't work, because it was just a joke with him. He was really a playboy guy. He said, yeah, my store's in trouble. Da, 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 da. I said, well, what you ought to do is not have to go back to work. You just sell it to me. Sell it to us. You know? He says, I'd do that.
That's when you found Roy and said, we gotta go.
And this was on a Tuesday. Roy's day off was Wednesday. So I went in and told Roy. Roy called him back, and we set it up. And we both took Wednesday off, and we drove down to Santa Cruz and met with Don Starr. And on a napkin in a restaurant, they put together a deal. And we came back and told Weaver, and Weaver had a heart attack.
Oh, I'm sure.
And, you know, Roy owned, when Weaver bought out Canal, he'd wanted to tie Roy to that. So he'd given Roy 5%, or Roy paid for it, probably, knowing Weaver. But anyway, so Roy wanted to get his money out. And Weaver said, no, I'm not gonna buy you out. And their agreement was that if Weaver offered Roy something for his piece, that Roy had the ability to turn it around on him and say, okay, if that's 5%, then this is what 95% is, and I'll buy you out, and you're out. And Weaver knew Roy's financial situation. Roy didn't have that kind of money. But when Weaver told him he wasn't gonna give him anything, that got, that didn't sit well.
No, I imagine not.
So Roy was really feeling like, I can't do this without getting something for that. And so, but he's still going, and he had two houses that he was like you. He had two rental houses. He got his a little different than you did. He lived in them, and then when Sharon wanted a new house, he got her a new house, and he didn't sell the old house, so he rented it, and it worked out. And then he did again. So he had two rental houses in his house, and this was in a time when this was 1979. It was a very high interest rate time. Car business was a little tough, but anyway, he said the word got out that Weaver had done this to him, and Al Cannell pulled Roy aside and says, I'll give you the 95%.
So you can go buy out
Weaver. And it's predicated on, Weaver finally said, I'll give you this much money. Well, that much money is the 5%. Figure it out, this is what 95% is. And Cannell knew that's nothing.
Yeah.
So he said, I'll give you the 95%. So when Roy called Dean's bluff, that's when it all went together.
Interesting. So by this time, you've taken the family out of San Mateo, right?
Yes.
We've gone
Concord.
to Concord, and Concord is Pleasant Hill.
No, 1818 Magnolia Drive in Concord.
Oh, is Concord where we got the train set?
Yep,
That's where Toby the dog was, and the
Yep.
garage with the missing the back door.
yep,
Okay, and that's the first place you actually bought.
yes. That was,
So that's okay. So because that was first grade for me. I can remember that. I remember there was a set of train tracks running behind the houses across the street. Is that accurate?
I don't know.
I think it was our street. Across the street was, I don't know who the neighbor across the street was that you built the
That's where we put the
train set together. And then behind their house was a set of tracks that ran.
I was never behind their house. I mean, I didn't.
Oh, I was all the time back there walking up and down the tracks, so
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's right. But that's one of my earliest memories is first grade in that house.
Mm-hmm.
And
I have the memory I have at that time was, I made the shift back to Cannell's, and we bought that house. It took everything we could possibly beg, borrow, and steal to get into it. And it wasn't really a great house, but it was a house.
right.
And I remember telling your mother, we really gotta, because we're coming into Christmas. I said, we really gotta pull back here. And she came out with a doll that she had had when she was a little girl, and had a whole bunch of outfits for it that she and her mother had made. And so she was going to give that to Kristen. And I had won this postage stamp railroad. The whole railroad in the kit was this big. But it was really nice, and I'd won it in a contest. and I kept it for quite a few years because I think I won it when I was with Firestone.
Mm.
So we decided we're going to give you that, and the two little girls, you know,
They were so small they
yeah,
wouldn't even know, huh?
It's not going to be a big deal. But then the train got to be a big deal because the first thing we did is one day we put all you kids out, we were in the bedroom, and we opened up that train box and we'd set the little train up on the bed. There was whole track and everything was about this big.
Okay.
And on the bed it's really rockety. So the next thing I do is I think I need to get a little more track. So I find out where there's a train store, and there's a couple of them. And I go to this train store, and then I find they got this track that's flexible. You can kind of make it go wherever you want.
Put bends in it. And...
Oh yeah. Oh, it was. This was, but it's end gauge, which is the smallest one, and it's this particular store didn't have very much. So then he sent me to another store, and I went to another store, and this store had everything. And I thought, well, I got to go to the lumber yard and get me a board to put it on. So I go to the lumber yard, and I go in and I look. I said, I want to put a board, and they said, okay. And I said, I want you to cut it down to the size I need. And they said, okay. So the board, I think, was $8 for a full sheet of plywood. And you had to buy a full sheet. They just didn't cut you off.
Right.
They were going to cut for me. And then they were going to charge me about another $8 to cut it. I said,
I'll just take the plywood as is, huh?
yeah, took the whole piece. So I did that. I brought that home and got some of that track. It was all wiggly and it was kind of neat. But I really, in that little house, we really didn't have any place to put that up. Well, our neighbor across the street, who was a FedEx driver, that or UPS, one of the two, he was a nice guy. He said, well, you can bring it over here. We do it over here. He had a lot of tools too, and I didn't have a lot of tools. So we went over and got some sawhorses and put that board on it, and we started fooling around with it. And then we decided we're going to do this paper mache and build mountains and rivers and lakes and towns. And I take your mother with me, and we go to the train store to get some more track. And while I'm looking at the track and trying to decide what I'm going to do, she's off looking at these nifty new little buildings and stuff.
A little gas station here,
Yeah.
a little car dealership there.
Yeah.
A little...
And a church and a lumber yard and some other stuff. And one of the key points here is this. Every time I would go to the store and buy something for that train set, your mother's math meant if I bought it for you, then an equal amount had to be going to Kristen and to Tracy and to Jennifer. So when I spend $1, it's $4.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, we're working on that train set over at the neighbor's house,
and he's probably getting you excited about it too, because he's
sure.
putting it together, and you guys are catching the fever of building this little model.
That was nearly the entire fun of the whole thing.
Was the assembly and putting it
Was
together?
putting that thing together and building it, because even you and the other kids would come over because we're working on this train, and it was always hush hush. It was somebody else's train.
Right. We would go over there and we would stare at it with envy that somebody else is going to get this train for Christmas, and we watched it come together. Never even thinking for a moment that it was going to be at our house on Christmas morning.
No, but finally we get it together, and it's time to hook up the transformer. Well, this little bitty train has a little bitty transformers about that big. And I hooked up the transformer, I hooked it up to the line. This is the moment of truth. I turn it on, Nothing happens. Nothing happens. So I go back to the train store. And now at the train store, they see me coming every time. Oh, hey! You know? Anyway, and in there they had this beautiful display case. And it had all of these transformers in it. They had this one over here, this one over here. $400, $300, $200, $175. I'm thinking, oh man, I can't do this. And my little agent comes bopping over. I said, well, I got a problem with my train set. I said, I need more transformer.
Right, because the amount of track you had, it just couldn't power it, right?
Well, that was my thinking. That's not true.
That's not what it was, huh?
No. So anyway, and he launches into this spiel, man. I got the greatest. I got the one. I got the perfect, the maximum, the best that'll do everything that you bought, everything. It'll run it all. It'll do everything. And I'm just waiting for him to take me over to that display case and show me that $450 one. And he says, just a minute. And he goes back to the counter and comes up. And he lays it down on the counter and he says, this right here is $79. I said, sold. I take it home, I hook it up to the deal, and I turn it on, and guess what? Nothing happens.
Nothing happens, huh?
So then I went back to the train store. I said, what's going on? He says, well, here, this is the handy dandy. Everything you want to know about building model railroads is in this book. You just got to buy this book. So I bought the book. And it wasn't really expensive, but it was probably $3 or $4. And of course, $3 or $4 turns into $12 to $15.
Because you got to spread it to the other three
Got to
kids.
spread, yep. Anyway, we get home, and I read in the book, and what I've done is through a series of switches, I made it so that I could have the train going clockwise, and through a series of switches, I could make it go counterclockwise. Well, what I didn't realize is that electricity does the same thing.
It'll reverse the polarity.
So what I was doing is I was reversing it and making it short itself out. So I had to go get these little spacers, and they were, I think a quarter bought 10 of them. And I had to put these little spacers wherever we took that change in direction so that it'd work. So I put I think there was a total of 4 that I had to put in, and hooked it up and turned it on, and away it went. Now it's just about Christmas. We've still got it across the street at the garage. But on Christmas Eve, I want to say his name was Clay. The neighbor and I brought it over. Well, there's only one place to put it in the whole house.
It's right on the dining room table.
Right on the table, the only place we had. And then we had a little bitty living room. I could put it on top of the bed, but that wasn't going to work either. So we put it on top of the table. And the next morning, up we come. Voila, it's Christmas. Everybody's happy and joyous, and turn on the TV about it. And then Becky says, well, it's time to fix Christmas dinner.
Well, Beth says.
Or Beth, right. And so we took it and put it out in the garage, which is, as you know, is open in the back.
Yeah.
And we immediately realized that we needed a bigger house. So we got a hold of Roger. Roger Scott was a good friend of mine and good friend of Roy's. He was in the real estate business, and he, I don't know how he did it, but he took us out of that house and put us into Pleasant Hill, which was really a beautiful house. That was a nice house.
Yeah.
And put us in Pleasant Hill, and we moved into Pleasant Hill on the 1st of March of 1979. And we went up and visited your grandparents, and we came back, and it was right at that time is when I made the call to Don Starr. So now we're headed to Santa Cruz.
Yep.
Well, you can't buy, you know, if you buy a house and then within 18 months buy another house, if you buy a third house, the middle house gets kicked out and you have to pay the taxes on it. And it's real expensive. So when we found Santa Cruz, I couldn't buy a house in Santa Cruz. I rented out Pleasant Hill until the 18 months was up so I could sell it.
And that's when we rented Anchorage Avenue.
Yep.
Because I remember Pleasant Hill. Well, I remember, was it Concord where the train set was?
Yes.
I remember starting first grade there, but finishing first grade in
Pleasant
Hill. We started second grade where I was there 2 weeks or something, and the next thing you know, we're down in Santa Cruz, and Live Oak Elementary, I think is what it was called, is where I finished second grade. I mean, basically did all my second grade there. But we were living in that rental there in the Pleasure Point area, right?
Yep. 100 Anchorage, that was the
100
address.
Yep. I actually took a family vacation back to Santa Cruz with my kids and whatnot back when Trey was 6 months old. So that would have been what, almost 9 years ago, essentially. And that was one of the places we drove past was that old house.
They've really tuned it up, but
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter if it's a shack. Everything's over $1 million in that neighborhood now.
oh,
But anyway,
Aptos is over $1 million.
Oh, I'm sure.
365 Danube.
oh, I'm sure it is. Yeah, I remember talking to Randy, who's still in that neighborhood, 15 years ago, and he was, there wasn't a house in that neighborhood that wasn't over $800,000.
Yeah.
15 years ago. So,
Well, here, I'll show you Danube real quick.
well,
Okay, no.
dude, I was going to say, with what we've got on here, I don't think they're going to want to look at the screen. But anyway, we go to Aptos. You put together Roy Baldwin Motor Company, and what did you have? You had Oldsmobile, you had Jeep,
Fiat,
Renault,
and AMC.
and AMC.
And Oldsmobile.
Well, we started with Oldsmobile on
Yeah.
that list, but anyway.
Okay.
Anyway, I think we covered that on a previous one. But it's now that we are settled in and we're at Santa Cruz for a year, and then you can finally, we buy Aptos and stay there for what, close to 10, didn't we?
Yeah.
And we, I think, covered some of what happened there with going over to Expressway and then over to that other dealer as
Mary Oldsmobile.
Yep, as a little bit of a fixer. And did you go to Love Chevrolet from there?
Yeah.
And then from Love Chevrolet, you did your own Water Street Auto Brokers.
I was with Love for a year. I did what I was contracted to do, and then they let me go. I didn't know why, but they did. And so that's when I did auto brokers.
You basically went into Love doing the same thing you did with that other dealer, or just kind of
Yeah.
a fix-it-upper kind of thing.
Yeah.
You were the fix-it guy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Water Street Auto Brokers. And by then, I'm of an age, when we get to that point, I'm of an age where I'm starting to drive now because you're bringing home, like Kristen and I had matching convertible cabriolets because you were running this used car lot. And so we
Yeah.
just drove something on a dealer plate for however many time. And then you're back to
Love.
Love, and then from Love you end up coming here. Well, let's talk about each of the kids to this point, because right now we haven't even got to the point where we've collected Richard and Russell in our
No.
conversations.
No, Richard, of course, they were born over in Santa Cruz, but probably I probably ought to do Tracy.
Yeah, agreed.
Tracy was for sure planned, and we didn't think she was going to be a girl. That's true, but that your mother said she wanted to keep everybody close. She didn't want to, and I agreed with her. I didn't like the fact that I came from a family that my oldest brother is 12 years older than I was. My first remembrance of Lloyd was really him coming home from the Navy. I mean, I remember when he left for the Navy. I remember going to the train station. That's the first time I ever went to a great big train station. But he took the train to go to San Diego when he went in the Navy in 52. But we didn't want to have the family all spread out. We wanted to kind of keep them close. And so she said that Jennifer needed a pal.
Well, also that you knew that you had two more sons, right?
Well,
So you-
yeah, we did talk about that, but by the same token, we were starting to say, man, these kids are real expensive.
and or Grandpa got it wrong. I've already got a.
No, I didn't think Grandpa got it wrong.
Okay.
That never happened. No, I've never doubted that. What I was stupid enough is I get caught up in other worldly things and not paying attention, and so anyway, I had to. There were lessons I needed to learn before they got here, I guess. But Tracy, she was no trouble. She was easy baby, easy one, probably the easiest of all of them. And she didn't require a lot of attention, and unfortunately, I really probably didn't give her as much as she wanted. She had some special abilities, though. She seemed to be very sincere, kind, giving, and wanted to help. Wanted to be. She was nowhere near the wild Indian that Jennifer was as a little one.
Jennifer was the more opinionated, outspoken, and Tracy kind of took a back seat to that.
Yep.
More of a peacemaker type.
Yeah, for sure. She
Kind of
was.
followed along a little bit.
Yep.
Well,
Very private.
the name Tracy, that was one of the ones you brought to the marriage. Got any history on that?
What's that?
The name Tracy was one of the names you brought to the marriage that you wanted for your kids.
I just liked it.
Oh, there wasn't anybody in
nobody-
school or anything like that?
No, nobody that I remember. No, I don't. But again, it was, as you know, Dennis liked that name too. So, and I mean, I wasn't aware of Dennis's Tracy when Tracy came along, though they're probably pretty close to the same age.
Is his Tracy a girl or a boy?
Girl,
Okay.
spell it the same.
I was gonna say, Mom. I for whatever reason in my mind, I associate the IE in Tracy with Mom's creative spelling, or is that you? Do I have that wrong?
No, that's how I spelled it.
You always spelled it IE.
Mm-hmm.
I know that when I was a little kid, Robbie was an IE, and Jenny was an IE, and Tracy was an IE. Was Kristen ever a Chrissy?
No, she was pumpkin.
She was always pumpkin, huh?
Yeah.
So, all right. So Tracy, easygoing, comes along.
My story for Tracy is, I think it was fourth grade. She had a teacher, and
Fourth grade. So by now, that's
Aptos.
that's Aptos and Mar Vista Elementary.
Yep.
Okay.
And this teacher had already had Jennifer, I believe, and Jennifer, of course, was a whiz kid.
Mm-hmm.
And Beth went to parent-teacher conference with this teacher, and the teacher told her that there's no help for Tracy. She's just not smart. She just can't learn. She'll make somebody a good housewife. and when your mother relayed that story to me, it took everything I could do to keep her from wanting to go back and kill her. She was just so mad. She really was.
Mom was on the rampage, huh?
Oh boy. And in the reality of it, I'd say she's done pretty good.
Oh yeah, no question.
Education wise, anyway.
Yeah, as far as school goes, the only one that's got her beat, because she has a master's degree, is Richard with his doctorate in dentistry.
Yep.
Nobody else has come close to her.
Well, and you got to
educational
throw Soren in there too, because he's
Well,
got a doctorate.
Well, I was talking about the six of us, the siblings.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a son-in-law that is a pharmacist. So,
Yep.
but that's not what I was talking about. It always seems to me that the next generation, and this isn't, I suppose, always the case, but ideally, you always want better for your kids, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So, you think how many in your family graduated college, how many of your children graduated college, and now here, we'll take my generation. I have 5 children, 4 of which already have their degrees, one with a son-in-law with a doctor in pharmacy, and another one that's a master's in social work, just like Tracy.
Yep.
And then I have my 5th child who's still in school and still working towards their degree. So I don't doubt that all 5 of mine will have
Yeah.
degrees by
No
the time
question.
it's all said and done.
Yep.
But so you're always hoping that the next generation can build on the success of the previous one and accomplish even more. I mean, you
I
want
agree.
that for your kids, right?
Absolutely.
You want to be the proud parent. And so
Yep.
what you're saying is you're awfully proud of all your kids, and Tracy's got the academic chops.
Yep. She got the top one, her of the girls, and of course Richard, epidemically, he's got the one there. But
Yep.
I really think that success-wise, from things that I meet are in success, I think both you and Russell have got the lead on the rest of them.
Well, again, I don't think there's any slouches in the bunch.
No.
Just to be fair. But if you're, your comment there may be a little partial because we both came up through the automobile industry, which happened to be where you were too. So
Yeah.
maybe you relate with that a little better than you do, say, Jennifer, who's currently working in a school district as an aide in the school or something. She's happy. She's successful in that. It just may not have quite the same glamour, as you will, as some high roller in the car business. That.
Yeah,
kind of
well,
thing. Or the title of dentist in Richard's case.
Well, all of those are factors, but the thing that I'm talking about is making some really good, solid decisions. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the best family-directed concerns, again, go to you and Russell. I think that you've done a much better job than I did in prioritizing and keeping your priorities light. One of the things that I wish I had done, going back in hindsight, was when I left Roy Baldwin Motor Company, there was a period of time there where I was contemplating not continuing to get married, and I was going to get a divorce.
Right.
And Roy said to me, I think I led into the conversation. I said to Roy, I says, "How do you and Sharon keep going?" Because Sharon, she didn't have anywhere near the business acclamation that Roy had, but he said something to me, and he said, "There isn't an alternative. We don't have an option. We don't even consider that there's an option. The only option is to work through it." And that's what brought me back at that point.
Yeah, because if I analyze what you're saying, you had a point in your marriage early on with 2 kids where because of mom's getting too close with a coworker and somebody else in the neighborhood or something, because didn't you say
Yep.
another one
Les
that
Cannon.
there was another guy that was getting too cozy with her as well. So those emotional infidelity type scenarios had you wondering if things were going to go on. Now you add 2 more kids to the thing. Richard comes along. There's son number 2. Oh, maybe there is something going on here, but you and mom are kind of in a bad spot again as far as marriage goes. And if I recall, she was done. She was like, "I'm not bringing any more kids in this situation." And you were like, "Well, I've got 2. There's a 3rd son out there. We got to make this work."
Yep.
Right? Because you're right. You were, was it when you were staying over when you were working at Expressway?
Yep.
You didn't like that commute. You ended up taking an apartment over there and staying over there. And
Yep.
that's where you were contemplating separating?
Yep.
Because I remember as a kid crying my eyes out when you came and told us that you were going to be living somewhere else. And I don't know how long that lasted, if that lease was 6 months or a year, but
6 months probably.
yeah. But it was during that time that, just before that, you said we got to buckle down, and that's when Russell was conceived. Russell was born, but I don't know that he came home from the hospital and you started packing your bags, didn't you?
Yep.
I mean, it was that mom was single mom for all intents and purposes with a newborn child, and of course Russell and Richard are what, 2 years apart in age, so
Yep.
she had a toddler and a newborn, and you exit the scene.
Yep.
And you go live over there for a time, and then of course the things that happen over there are stressful too, with the new guy coming in, right?
Yep.
The guy that you said the only time he was telling the truth is when his lips weren't moving.
Yep. No, Kay Delary was one of the most uncredible person I ever met. In fact, I think he, through his, we had a guy named Mr. Singh who was a detailer. He was an independent contractor, but and he was dark like Kay was. Kay was from Pakistan, and he wasn't from Pakistan, but Kay always referred to him as, you know, we're brothers, we're both black. And but anyway, I think what Kay did to that guy killed him. Killed him. Too bad. I mean, he was a good guy too. Anyway, this guy was a bad guy, but and he couldn't fire me. He couldn't fire me.
Yeah, I think we covered that in a previous session. He finally found your Achilles heel, and that was your people. So when he threatened to go after Mike Wiseman,
Oh, he
for
went
example,
after Mike Weiser.
that's when you said, "I'm out."
Yep. We cut a deal. We wrote it up, and I signed it, and he signed it, and I walked away, and Mike got paid, and stayed there for a while longer, not much longer. Then he went back to Utah.
But he was able to, at least then, that gave Mike the ability to leave on his terms and not just suddenly be out the door, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, you do the little stint at those two places. Russell's born. You move out. You're gone for 6 months, maybe a year at most, and then you're back.
No, it wasn't a year. It was 6 months.
6 months. But when you came back, was that when Love Chevrolet got kicked off? Because I remember you commuting from Aptos to Seaside.
Yeah, well, that was yeah. That's when I went to after Expressway, I left and did Mary Oldsmobile in San Jose, but I was still in San Jose. And then that one was really fast. It was so easy, and then I got the call from Steve Phillips, who had worked for me at Roy Baldwin Motor Company, and who is now working at Love Chevrolet. And he had left when Don Smith left Riverton, who was the guy that kind of.
You said Riverton. You didn't mean Riverton.
Oh yeah.
Riverton's not in the picture yet,
No,
right? So.
no. So Water Street with Roy.
By Roy Baldwin Motor Company.
Yeah. Roy Baldwin Motor Company
Osmond G.
hired
Canal.
Don Smith, and Don Smith was didn't last very long, but one of the salesmen was Steve Phillips, who was there, and then they hired Mike Withrow, and when they did that, that's when I went to. I mean, before with Don Smith is when that year I did the Little League thing.
Right, you
and
took the
da-da-da-da.
time off and came was my coach. So I would have been
That's when I found
10 working on 11.
Yep, and that's when I found Expressway. That's 1983, and I went over to work at Expressway with Norm Garrett, who is another guy that's out of my past, but one of the people crossed me a second time, and then I did right at the end. I did Mary Oldsmobile. It was only for a couple months, but that's when Steve Phillips got in touch with me and said Frank Yanda wanted a general sales manager. And so I went down and interviewed with him, and I went down there. I was there for 1 year, and I got the place really humming, but there was just too much backbiting and people trying to undermine me. And in doing so, when they went to Hawaii that summer, they let me go. And that's when I came back and did Water Street, and with Jim Harrison. Jim had hired on with me at Love. And he came up there and we did Water Street. Well, 1 year later, almost to the day, Frank calls me and says, man, is there any way that you'll come back? You know, I'll do anything. Because he is back losing his ass and in big trouble.
That's kind of like the same scenario you had with the guy at Canals, right?
Yep,
Saying, come on back. I won't talk to you.
yep.
Of course, Frank didn't say I won't talk to you. He just said, I need you to come
Yep.
put this
Well,
back together.
And that wasn't just a quick. We got together, we sat down and talked, we put an agreement together because I didn't want to get sideswiped again. And we talked it out, and he said, no, you have full control. And we talked about Steve, who was at that time going to Berkeley school, and him getting out and that kind of stuff. And I could have held him to it, and Frank was honorable enough that he would have stuck it out, and I could have stayed there. But when Steve started pushing, and Steve started being the thorn in my side, you know, he didn't want to wait to be the man. He wanted it now.
Instead of working his way up through the ranks, he just
Yep.
said, put me in at the top, huh?
Yep. And that backfired a little bit on him, but because he ended up leaving right after that when he got married, and his wife had triplets. She was from Michigan, and her mother said, you have to come home to have the babies. And so she went home, and Steve accommodated, and she wouldn't come back to California.
So he ended up going out there, which I understand he's had a successful career.
Oh, very successful.
Out there. So whatever foundation you gave him served him well.
Yeah.
To the point where he didn't need to come take over Dad's store per se. He's doing just fine in Michigan.
Yep. And there was one more time right after Frank's wife died, Eleanor. He called me again, and that was during the Tristan time. And I went down there and tried to help him and help the store again, but it didn't work out. I did actually do his store twice with Automax.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Helping him get some salespeople.
Yep. We had two really good campaigns done there.
Is Frank still alive or is he passed?
Frank's still alive, but he is not a dealer anymore. He gave it up right about that time. You know, there's a lot of dealers that they were trying to lean on him, and he wasn't going for that.
Yeah.
And so.
All right, so let's see if there's anything we should touch on in the last 90 seconds that we have here, because see if we talked about anything that we probably need to clarify for this session. I don't know, we've talked about most of the kids. I mean, we haven't done a lot of talk about the boys yet, but I'm sure we have plenty of sessions to do them, but they also came late to the party. I mean, Richard is almost 11 years younger than me, which puts him 13-ish years younger than Kristen, because Kristen's 15 months older than me. And then Russell, he's 13-ish years younger than me. So
Yeah, he got a birthday Friday, and I think he's 42.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Sounds right. But anyway, so I'm sure we'll touch on them there. I'd say their glory years are really Hidden Valley Club Drive, don't you think? Because
Yeah,
that's where
I think so.
they came to Utah and really thrived, whereas the Jennifer and Tracy came to Utah as teenagers that should have been enjoying their senior years and things, and junior and senior year, and instead.
You're aware of Tracy's situation.
Oh yeah, and again, I don't know that we necessarily need to go into a lot of detail
No.
in these conversations with us, but it did not put her in a good headspace to come from her sophomore year, I think is what you're halfway through.
But that's an exact situation of where a really bad thing, she turned it into
Oh,
a career.
absolutely.
Really, that's where she got the bug to do
Go
what
do
she
social
does.
work, yeah. All right, well, we've got 10 seconds now, so we'll be signing off, but we can put things like that on the list for the next time.
Yep. Okay. Adios.